take questions in advance. So if anyone feels like they might want to ask a question, I'm going to go ahead and hand these out. So if anyone feels like they might want one. That's great, thank you.
Will they pick them up too?
Kobe will make a remark to let you know to pass them in. So just if you, as you go, if you have questions, just write them down.
Like so. ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Tacher. I'm the director of Ford's Theater Society. On behalf of the Board of Trustees and everyone at Ford's Theater, I want to welcome you to tonight's Lincoln Legacy Project event. The Lincoln Legacy Project is Ford's ongoing effort to create dialogue in our nation's capital around some of the issues emblematic of Abraham Lincoln: tolerance, equality, and acceptance. The Lincoln Legacy Project takes a closer look at racial and religious intolerance, social injustice, and civil rights in both American history and contemporary society. Through a diversity of programming, the Lincoln Legacy Project encourages people of differing viewpoints to engage in meaningful and respectful dialogue about diversity and understanding. Tonight's event marks the first in a series of special Monday night community conversations focusing on tolerance. Additionally, across the street at Ford's Theater Center for Education Leadership, the exhibit Not Alone, The Power of Response is currently running until November 3rd. This amazingly powerful and moving exhibit shares never-before-seen letters of support sent to Matthew Shepard's family from complete strangers all over the world in the wake of his brutal attack. These letters are paired with artist Jeff Sheng's Where Matthew Lay Dying, a hauntingly beautiful composite photograph of the fence outside Laramie taken from Matthew's perspective. The set for the centerpiece production of this year's Lincoln Legacy Project serves as the backdrop for tonight's panel. This production, The Laramie Project, presents a deeply complex portrait of a community's response to the murder of Matthew Shepard, a young gay man living in Laramie, Wyoming. This exploration of ordinary people in the face of extraordinary events, combined with the human spirit's power to persevere and triumph over bigotry and violence, serves as a potent starting point for this year's Legacy Project conversations. The Lincoln Legacy Project is made possible by founding sponsor Ronald O. Perlman, chairman and CEO of McAndrews & Forbes Holding, Inc. McAndrews & Forbes has been an important partner for the last several years, and I ask you to join me in acknowledging their incredible generosity and support of this important project. The Lincoln Legacy Project is presented in partnership with a number of people. The Matthew Shepard Foundation, the Trevor Project, supporting and mentoring youth advocates and leaders, Facing History in Ourselves, Not in Our Town, Split This Rock, Teaching for Change, the Anti-Defamation League, Southern Poverty Law Center, the DC Center, the Human Rights Campaign, Tectonic Theater Project, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and PFLAG Metro DC chapter. It is generously supported by our official media partner, the Washington Post, and by Gregory Craig, the Pew Charitable Trust, and the Abraham Lincoln Bicentennial Foundation. Please join me in giving all of them a round of applause. We are honored to have two incredible women here as part of this evening's conversation. Named a living legend by the Library of Congress, Cokie Roberts is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and author and was cited by the American Women in Radio and Television as one of the 50 greatest women in the history of broadcasting. Cokie is joined on stage tonight by Judy Shepard. Since her son Matthew's murder, Judy has become one of the most visible advocates for equality for all people under the law. Judy and her husband Dennis created the Matthew Shepard Foundation, and they were some of the strongest supporters for the federal hate crimes legislation, which was signed into law in 2009. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure. Please join me in welcoming Cokie Roberts and Judy Shepard.
So Judy Shepard, what an honor to be with you here. And I know you're about to enter the dreadful month of October. And it was 15 years ago, this coming Sunday, that your son was so brutally attacked. And I'm sure you never go through a day without gotten a lot done though in those 15 years. Did you ever imagine you'd be sitting on stage at Ford's Theater with Lincoln's box right up above you?
Not in a million years. It wasn't even on my bucket list. Coming to the theater was on my bucket list, but certainly not this. It's such an honor that they would deem the Learning Project worthy of the Lincoln Legacy.
And of course, it's going to be opening here this week and tomorrow, I guess. Tell us a little bit about it. It's played around the country and in schools as well.
Yes, it's actually one of the most produced plays in the U.S. Actually, it's been performed in the world, all over the world, translated into several languages. And I think one of the reasons is it represents a microcosm of every community that's in the world. Every community has those people represented in the Learning Project. And it's the truth. It's what really happened. I don't think it's a unique experience. It's a wonderful experience of tears and laughter and eye-opening revelations about yourself and your neighbors.
Well, we should describe it a little bit. I guess most of you do know something about it, but it's filmmakers went to Laramie after
playwrights actually and interviewed many of the people that were in Laramie about how what had happened to Matt had affected them. People from all walks of life, all ideologies, all beliefs, to interview them how they felt about the media coming, basically taking over Laramie, how who Matt was, Matt's life had affected them. It's not about Matt, it's not about Matt's family, it's about the community in Laramie.
And you grew up in Wyoming.
Yeah.
So was that particularly meaningful to you to have it be about Laramie?
Well, I thought it was really important because the press began to identify Laramie and the state of Wyoming actually as a hateful place responsible for what happened to Matt. And those two young men were anomalies in Laramie too. But they exist everywhere, not just in rural places. It quickly became clear to us that everybody was blaming, the state of Wyoming and the city of Laramie. So I wanted folks to see that Laramie was good as well as unacceptable.
And that it was every place USA.
Yes.
Or every place globe.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
You, speaking of every place globe, were not in Wyoming when this horrible event happened. You were in Saudi Arabia. And you had this excruciating trip home.
Yeah, we got the call really early in the morning, and
your husband was working there.
Yes, he was in the oil business there, and we were in our house. We got the call really early in the morning, and we expected it to be Matt because he always called early in the morning. Time zones were kind of a challenge for Matt. So, but it was the hospital telling us as much as they could about Matt's condition, and we began the long process of you can't just leave Saudi Arabia. You have to go through a paper trail. So it was a 19-hour wait to even get out of the country, and then a very long flight, about 25 hours, to get into the kingdom, get out of the kingdom.
And during that time, you really didn't know what his state was?
No, we couldn't check on his condition when we began to travel. So it wasn't until we got to the States that we saw on the front page of the newspapers Matt's story all over the place, which was astounding to us.
Well, when you say that in your book, so you arrived in Minnesota and you're reading your other son who was in boarding school there, and your other relatives are there meeting you, and you look down and you see the New York Times with your son on page 1. Did you have any idea of that?
Not just page 1, above the fold.
You now know the lingo.
Yeah. It was overwhelming. One of my biggest fears about the whole incident was that knowing that Matt was gay is that the newspapers were going to, we didn't even know the circumstances of what had happened. But when we saw the article, it's like, oh gosh, now they're going to start saying, oh, he was gay, he kind of deserved it. Because that was what we were expecting from the press 15 years ago. But it certainly did not turn out that way. We was like, why would anybody even be interested in this young man from very rural Wyoming where nobody lives? I actually still don't understand that, but it was...
Well, you must have some understanding of it after this period. You must have thought about it a lot.
Well, I think there was a confluence of events that just sort of all came together at the same time. that created the interest from the press, that generated all the articles, that generated all the interest, but we didn't think it was going to last 15 years.
And of course, at that moment, there was no way of you really understanding it, but at that moment, you really had become a public person.
Right. It was interesting. Nobody knew what we looked like. Nobody knew where we lived.
That was a help.
Yes. We didn't have a home address, so it's not like anybody could park out in our front yard. And they didn't know what we looked like. And the hospital in Fort Collins, where Matt was now, was very careful of protecting us and our identity. So we went in secret doors and managed to avoid everybody. And the floor where Matt was sealed off by security. So you couldn't be just anybody and go up there.
But it must have been so overwhelming. It's one thing if you run for public office or if you go on the stage or into movies where you have a certain expectation that you are going to be recognized and that people are going to be interested in what you're doing and all that. But to suddenly just be thrust into this must be so difficult.
Well, to be really honest, I am very good at compartmentalizing. And some people tell me I'm kind of too good at it. But the focus of us being there was to be with Matt. So we just shut out everything else. We didn't read the papers, we didn't watch the news on TV, we really shut everything out. Our purpose, as the doctor told us it should be, was to be a calming influence in Matt's room. And that meant we couldn't be part of what was happening outside the room. We wanted Matt to know we were there, and we wanted him to feel like we didn't want it to feel like we were panicked or sad or angry or fearful, or we just wanted him to feel a calming presence. So the rest of it was just peripheral garbage.
Do you think he did know you were there?
Yeah. I have to think that.
Yeah. The press, though, was all around you, and hundreds of not just of us, I have to say, not just a small group. And what your main complaint was is they wanted to see you cry.
Yeah, it was. I had a very interesting lesson in the world of journalism. Several months after Matt passed in the National Press Club, I was with the Human Rights Campaign, and there might have been members of the James Byrd family there as well, talking about hate crime legislation. And when I gave my statement, I was getting through most of it, and then all of a sudden I wasn't, and I started to cry, and I heard the shutters and the cameras just going clickety clickety click, and in my head I'm thinking, oh, this is what they're here for, and that was a key piece of information for me,
because
I began to understand that if I ever wanted to have a voice, if I was going to cry, no one would pay any attention to what I was saying. They'd be worried about me and my well-being, not what I had to say.
But it's so hard not to cry in a situation like that.
It's nearly impossible. I just play this little mind game to not really be 100% present. So.
And I think it's okay for a mom to cry. It's not like you're running for president.
And I cry. I just try not to do it.
Mm-hmm. Of course, the fact that it was so public did have some awful aspects to it. The haters showed up. You had the Reverend Fred Phelps. Okay, here you're saying. And he was pretty horrible.
That's a nice way to put it.
How do you deal with that?
Well, we never saw him in person. We knew he was coming. The city was well prepared for him at the funeral. And it just was so unimportant to us. We just wanted to be there for our family and friends and Matt, and the rest of it was, again, peripheral garbage. He was definitely peripheral. But there were other haters besides him there, and in America, they have the right to do that. It was upsetting, I think more upsetting for people outside the church and the people who were worried about us than it was actually for us. And I think that continues to be the case. I feel very bad for them. I think their whole life devoted to hate is a horrible way to spend your life. They don't mean anything to me.
But then there was one group that really did defy them in the most wonderful way. Talk about the angel action.
Yeah, it was during the first trial in April of '99. One of Matt's friends, several of Matt's friends, had this idea that they were going to protect the crowd from the Westboro Baptist Church. So they devised.
Which have up signs saying God hates fags, and and that's one I can actually repeat.
And right now their big thing is U.S. military being killed in Iraq and overseas. Anyway, they came with those signs, and the city of Laramie had them sort of corralled off, and Matt's friends designed these angel costumes using PVC piping, so the wings were like enormous, and the bed sheets, and they had little halos of, I don't know, some kind of tinsel, and they had earplugs, so they couldn't hear anything that the protesters were saying. And they just stood all in front of them, and when the church people saw them coming, their signs just went to the ground, and their jaws fell open. They couldn't believe this was happening. It was quite an amazing. I didn't see it happen, but I've heard people talk about it many, many times. And it's actually part of the Land Project.
Yeah, to see these angels come out, it's quite wonderful.
Yeah, it is. It's great.
And it was all just organized by his friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the other side of it. I mean, so there's the downside of it being so public and so much in the news and all that was that it brought out these awful people, but it also brought out so many supportive people.
Yeah, that was, in fact, while Matt was still in the hospital, there were vigils outside the hospital. One day I decided I was going to go down and be part of one, and of course nobody knew who I was. I left the hospital and I joined in, and it was the most interesting experience in trying to decide why these people who had no connection to Matt felt so personally affected by what happened to Matt. And I think that was my first introduction to the after effects of a hate crime, was feeling the angst in this crowd, the sorrow and the fear. But we got 10,000 cards and letters from all over the world, many of them addressed to Shepard family, Wyoming, USA. That's it, and they still found us. Emails at the hospital actually crashed their system. We still get emails today and letters even today. So it was astounding. And of all those thousands and thousands of communications, the hateful ones, just tiny number.
And you know there were vigils going on all over the country.
Yes.
Here in Washington, with Ellen DeGeneres outside the Capitol.
Right. And our former Senator Simpson was there.
And so once the hospital vigil was over, and we had the funeral, then it was moving on to the trials.
Yeah.
And you were by yourself in Wyoming at that point.
Yeah, Dennis had to go back to work, and we had a victims advocate attorney who was my sidekick, and he was a wonderful, generous, kind, retired officer.
Is that something that the city provides you?
Yes, they did. He was really wonderful. He was really wonderful. He was very empathetic and understanding of everything we were going through. He'd been on the force many years. And he was with me, and there were friends who came and sat with me during a lot of the stuff. The first trial, we went through.
Well, why don't we just take a step back and can you tell us the story, or do you want me to tell the story of what happened?
You probably should.
So most of you probably do know, but Judy's son, Matthew Shepard, was in a bar and left with some guys. Apparently, maybe asked for a ride home. Maybe they just took him out, and they took him out, not really into the country, but out farther away from town, and started beating him in the cab of the truck that they were in, and beat him severely in the cab of the truck, and then pulled him out of the truck and put him next to a fence, and one of the person who was continually beating him with his gun in the gun barrel, McKinney, asked the driver, Henderson, to come tie him up, which he did, and then they beat him totally severely. Apparently, at one point, McKinney said, "Don't look at the license plate," because he didn't want to be found. And I guess Matt, out of defiance, and he said, "What's the license plate?" He said what the license plate was, and that he then got beaten really almost to death at that point. And then they drove away. And the question was, did they do this because of their hatred for gay people? And that was the assumption. And that was why so many people rallied around after them. And then the question was finding them first, and then they got into more trouble later that night in town, and then putting together the cases. And you were there for that.
Yes.
So is that, do I have that?
Yes.
And so the first trial was Henderson's trial.
In April of '99, I was there. Dennis had to go back to work in Saudi, and he had planned to come back for the end of the trial. But Henderson changed his plea after jury selection the weekend before the trial was to begin. So,
well, I think the Laramie Project gives you some sense of why he probably changed his plea, right? Because as they're going through jury selection, and these are the people he grew up with, the people in his community, and they asked one after the next, "Would you put him to death?"
yeah.
They said one after the next, and so he then changed his plea so he would not get to death.
Changed from not guilty to guilty, and when we knew that was going to happen, I immediately called Dennis, and he made it back in time for the actual sentencing. And he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. Part of the agreement was he would testify against McKinney when his trial came up, which he later reneged on. But what else are you going to do to him, right? So, so that was all over. That's when the Angels first made their appearance. The national press attention, sort of taken by surprise, I think, that there was no trial, and a little bit of anger because there were no questions were still not answered about what actually happened that night. So it was, and that's how the first one went.
But you didn't feel he had any remorse, and neither did the judge.
No. It's the law. We were pretty certain that he didn't actually participate in the physicality of beating Matt, but he did do the driving and the tying and did nothing to stop it. And that makes him just as guilty as the actual person delivering the blows. So, but we didn't at all feel like he was sorry for what he'd done. We felt like he was sorry for having gotten caught.
And did you feel that his actions were because your son was gay?
Russell? No. I never felt Russell was like that. I felt Russell did what he did because McKinney told him to do it. We always pretty much knew Russell was a follower, not ever an instigator, ever, ever. He was a good kid. He was an Eagle Scout through his high school years, and he just got lost somewhere.
And his grandmother came and pled for him.
Yes. She was a pillar of the community. She was just, this was a heartbreaking situation for her. She felt bad for us. We felt bad for her. It was a horrible situation all around.
So then comes the McKinney trial.
Yeah, that was a different ball of wax, that one. Dennis still in Saudi working. I went through jury selection and the trial without him, but with the victim advocate again. Friends came and sat with me during the trial. To various friends, they would change as time went on. And
how long did it go on?
Oh, a couple weeks, I think. I really don't have a clear memory of it.
And again, press everywhere.
Oh, everywhere. Yeah, I was taken in through the underground garage in the courthouse. I wouldn't have to see anybody.
But one day you ran into him.
Yeah, Dennis and I ran into McKinney. Yeah, that's one clear memory I do have, seeing him face to face from about me to you. And I remember looking at his eyes and thinking, man, there's just nothing there. Just nothing there.
And they played his interview immediately after his arrest, and that's also in the Laramie Project, where he basically said, I don't like gay people.
Right. And he said it more than once. He's changed a few details, but he said it more than once. He said he didn't like gay people. He didn't know Matt. It was they targeted Matt because he looked like he had money and they thought he was gay. He said that in his confession. They both did. And well, in technical terms in Wyoming, there's no hate crime law, so it couldn't be called a hate crime. But in the definition of it, that is a hate crime, targeting somebody to commit a crime. I don't think they set out to murder Matt. They set out to rob him, and it just turned into something totally different.
You think that's right? You think they
I do. I think that McKinney went a little wacky, angry. He's been known to do that. That was part of his MO, and I think that he just became more and more upset that Matt was actually a gay young man, and
in his
perceived to be, and he just sort of lost it.
And then he also was sentenced to
yeah.
where your husband, again, it's in the Laramie Project, this time you spoke at the Henderson trial, and this time he spoke, right? And basically said to McKinney, we're giving you life.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
We went through the trial and the verdicts came back guilty. We were all very confident, very sure that the jury would come back with the death penalty. Henderson's attorneys approached the prosecution and the police department with the idea that if McKinney would accept the same sentencing as Henderson, that he would never appeal. Well, if you go ahead with the death penalty, you all must know that there's mandatory appeals. It's not like it's just over. It's not.
It goes on and on and on.
On and on and on, right. And he would be making court appearances, and we'd have to see him, and Logan, our younger son, would have to see him just forever. And I just wanted it to be over. That was the key factor for me. I just wanted it to be over. Dennis was a little more resolute in saying, if you just put me in the same room with him, I will take care of it. It took a little convincing that maybe this is the route we should take, and we, as a family, we had this discussion, the four of us, about the death penalty in regard to James Byrd Jr. And his murder a few months before. And understanding that occasional...
The man who was dragged behind a truck in Texas.
In Texas, yeah, African-American. Actually, the other man, the hate crime bill is named for it, James Byrd Jr. And we all felt that sometimes when there's no question of guilt, and as there was no question of guilt in the murder of James Byrd Jr., that the death penalty is the way you need to go. So it was not a matter of we disagreed with the death penalty. We never, ever talked about it one way or the other prior to sentencing.
But it was bandied about that you did.
I know. That was just made up, like so many other things.
By the press?
We never made a statement about, for that very reason. We didn't want to influence the jury one way or the other. And the prosecuting attorney made very sure when he was going to ask for the death penalty, did we have any personal feelings about it one way or the other? And Dennis and I both said, you need to make that decision because that is the law. We are not going to influence you in that way, one way or the other, which is also how we felt when the attorneys approached with the deal. This has to be up to you. We will give you our opinion, but the decision has to be yours. So when they brought the suggestion that McKinney take this deal, we all talked it over, the attorney, Dennis, I, everyone, the principals in the case, and we came to the conclusion that it was better for everybody if we did go ahead and accept it. McKinney would just be gone forever, as Henderson already was. Logan would never have to see them, they would never be in court again, and there would never be a chance of a sentence change or any of that. So we agreed to that.
And that's the law. The law is that the aggrieved party can say to the jury, no death penalty, and the jury does not give a death penalty under those circumstances.
What happened was after the verdicts came in and we talked to the prosecuting attorney, they approached the judge and said, we have a sentencing agreement. So the law says the jury gets to decide the sentencing.
Right.
They came back with the sentencing agreement. The judge said that's okay, and that's what they went with.
I see. But your husband gave a very eloquent statement.
Yes, he did.
Talking about, I'm giving you life for Matt.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
You have to live every day of your life thanking Matt for yours.
Every time you celebrate Christmas, think that he won't. 4th of July, he's not there.
Right.
And you are. But then you went on and made life better for an awful lot of people. You started the Matthew Shepard Foundation. Mm-hmm. The seed money was the money you received while you were in the hospital from those 10,000 letters.
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the money coming in?
That was the most interesting. Cards and letters were coming in, and there was money in them. I was like, I don't know what they're sending us money for. And then it was like, one of them said, please use this money to help pay the hospital bills. Well, we weren't going to do that. That's not their responsibility. And college students were sending us $5 to go get a cup of coffee, and you know, it felt so intimate, so personal. And we thought the better use of that money and a good way to memorialize Matt, to remember Matt, was to do something for his community with that money. So we applied for 501c3 nonprofit status, and I got a lovely letter back from the IRS, form letter, saying, gosh, you have money but no ideas. I really can't do anything for you. So I guess you have ideas.
Who knew the IRS had ideas? This is.
I guess you have to have ideas and money too, or maybe most people apply with ideas and no money first. I don't know.
I think that's probably right.
So we incorporated and set up a mission to replace hate with understanding, compassion, and acceptance, and to especially concentrate on young people. And that's what we have done for the last 15 years. And we're going to continue to do it as long as we see a need.
And you still see?
We still see a need.
A huge need.
Yes.
But one of the things that was an initial cause was to get the hate crimes law passed.
Right.
Took 11 years.
Yeah, of my time.
But it was signed into law in 2009.
Yeah.
And that must have been quite a moment for you.
Oh, it was. I just don't have the vocabulary to describe it. We'd gone through so much disappointment. Well, maybe disappointment isn't the right word. We knew that in the Bush administration it would never get signed. President Bush had made that very clear. But we were certainly hopeful when President Obama was elected that now we had someone with a better understanding, I felt, of social justice. And we were very, very hopeful that he would do this for us. And it didn't happen on a standalone bill, which is what I was really hoping it would do. But it did get signed and passed, and it adds so much breadth and depth to what now the FBI can do to investigate and prosecute hate crimes.
Like what?
Well, it broadens the scope. It adds categories of gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, gender, the perception of sexual orientation and gender identity. And it eliminates the need for commerce, interstate commerce, part of it, and you don't have to be engaged in a government activity like voting or school. It broadens the whole scope of it. So it's
so it doesn't have to be a federal activity for it to have a federal law apply.
Right. And it doesn't mean they have to prosecute, but they can step if it appears that local can't do it or doesn't want to do it or won't do it, or it just gives them that capability.
But you didn't have that problem in Wyoming. I mean, they were willing to do it.
Oh yeah, the police force in Laramie and Albany County was just, they were magnificent and so professional and kind to us. I don't think we could have survived it if we'd had a combative law enforcement. They were so wonderful.
The prosecutor had been the big man on campus when you were at the University of Wyoming.
I remember when I was a student that he was running for student government president, and I was trying to pronounce his name. What is that guy's name? Rahuka?
What is his name?
Rahuka.
But that shows you sort of how small the community is, too.
Right.
So you were dealing with people you knew.
Well, I knew the name, but I didn't know the man. Actually, in Laramie, in the state of Wyoming, we're pretty much removed one person from knowing everybody. So there's just hardly anybody there.
But it's very different in different jurisdictions, and so getting this law passed was terribly important to you.
It was.
And you learned a lot about advocacy in doing this.
Yes.
You know, that it's slow, but that if you keep it up, that in the long run you probably can succeed.
Well, I knew I wasn't going to quit. I knew I was doing the right thing. I felt it in my heart. I'd met too many people who were so afraid, and too many people in law enforcement who were challenged by the idea that they couldn't do anything, and how desperately they needed something to help all the communities. I knew I wasn't giving up. It was a very frustrating. I'm not a good lobbyist. I'm not a patient person. I just feel like y'all should be doing the right thing because it's the right thing. And
you should tell them that right now.
Yeah. And it was very frustrating for me. I was really frustrating, but I wasn't gonna leave. I was a presence, if not in person, then certainly in spirit.
And the foundation has been a presence.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what you've been able to do.
Well, we're really small. Right now we're the biggest ever. We just became sort of a grown-up organization, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, with more staff than just me. We're still little. We have 6 or 5.5 or 6 people now. Offices in Denver, because some things you just can't do in Wyoming, like get there. So we moved our business to Denver, and I have a great, wonderful staff. They're so smart and young and in tune, and they're just beautiful people, all of them. I adore them all. They're very committed to what we do. It's a 24/7 job for us. We have wonderful websites full of information, connections for kids to look for counseling and medical services, and we're not a direct service provider, but we sure provide a lot of information to search for those things, and we are there to help if we can.
And to just the chat room where they can talk to each other and not feel afraid.
Right. It's a very safe place to be. We're very careful about who's on there and what they're doing, and we have a lot of bloggers who are young people who are aware of current situations. It's a different world now than it was when Matt was killed. Very different. But we're old people, and we don't know what they need to know, so we have a lot of young people participating in the websites.
Do you think it would have made a difference in Matt's life if he had had that kind of safe place? I know he was safe with you, but with other young people?
Well, I think the very idea that so many young people, particularly in areas that are underpopulated, that they feel very alone. The internet has been great in bringing those people together, people who feel very alone in their communities, but the internet has a bad side too. Mm-hmm. And
yes. I do know.
Yeah, so it's a challenge to try to keep the good part above the bad part, and I think it would have helped Matt because he was an information seeker. He was a connection seeker. He loved people, and I'm pretty sure he never is a long time. I'm pretty sure he didn't feel alone most of the time, but there must have been times when he wished he'd had a larger community of friends around him.
And of course, when he told you. It was another one of those middle of the night phone calls, right?
Yeah, he was a freshman in college in North Carolina, and he called and said, "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." I said, "Matt, what would that be?" And he said, "I am gay." And I said, "What took you so long to tell me?" And there's this quiet at the other end of the phone. He says, "I don't get it. How did you know before I knew?" And I said, "They tell me it's a mom thing."
But you say you knew when he was even a little kid.
Right. I began to wonder when he was about 8 if he might be a gay young man, and I don't know why in particular I thought that. Mother's intuition, perhaps. People have said to me maybe it was because his favorite Halloween costume for 3 years was Dolly Parton. That might have triggered a thought. I'm not really sure.
I bet it was a great costume.
Yeah, and he was really good at it too. So,
but it was a clue.
Yeah, might have been. Might have been.
But then it took him a while to tell his dad.
Yeah, he wanted to do it in person, and we were in Saudi Arabia, and he was in the States, and he had no visa to come back to Saudi. So it was a while before he told Dennis, and he asked me to not tell Dennis on this phone call, but I told Dennis anyway, largely because I know Dennis, the wonderful human being that he is, sometimes speaks before he thinks, and I didn't want him to say...
We don't know any men like that.
Yeah, we all know somebody like that. And I didn't want him to say something out of ignorance that would hurt Matt, not out of rejection, but because I knew that wasn't going to be an issue, but something that would hurt Matt that he couldn't take back. And so when I told Dennis, he said, "No, Matt isn't gay, he just hasn't met the right girl yet." Sort of a common response to that kind of statement. I said, "No, this really isn't about Matt finding the right girl. It's about Matt finding the right man." And he looked at me for a minute, and then he said, okay, I get that. It just may take me a little while to get used to the idea. So he had been processing it, you know, in the time period before Matt actually told him. And
Which was a good thing.
yeah, it was a good thing. And when Matt told him, Dennis was like, you said you had something really important to tell me, and now you said you're gay, and so what's the important thing you have to tell me? And I'm just, you know, in hindsight, we both think that perhaps we didn't give Matt enough credit for his own personal angst. He was a theater drama aficionado. He loved the theater, and we're thinking maybe in his head he'd built up this part 1, 2, and 3, and he never got to do any part 3. So we think maybe we, in hindsight, were a little too casual about our acceptance. But we were so determined that he not ever feel like we would reject him because of this thing, which really meant nothing to us. It was a non-issue totally. Same with Logan.
When you talk about the girl, you know, on the website there's this wonderful video of a guy saying 10 things not to ask a gay guy. And they're all pretty funny. Like, you know, when did you become gay? But one of them is, how do you know you don't like girls if you've never dated one, right?
Right. Yeah.
He says, and the guy's answer is, how do you know you don't like guys if you've never dated one? You know.
Good point.
But you also spend a lot of time in schools.
I do, colleges mostly. I'm not invited to many public high schools. Private high schools, yes. Public, not so much. There's a great fear for backlash of parents who don't want to even discuss the gay issue because they don't have gay kids in that school. I don't know what world they live in, but so I'm not often invited to a public school, high school.
But you have spoken to millions of people at this point.
Yes, millions.
And that's mainly on college campuses?
Colleges, corporations, all kinds of events, conferences, all kinds of stuff, wherever. I'll go wherever I'm invited. I just feel like still in the beginning, we thought we had a small window of opportunity of maybe a couple years. I still think we just have a window of opportunity, and I'm not going to let an opportunity to go by to perhaps change somebody's way of thinking.
And when you're there, what do you tell them?
I tell a little bit about, I opened the program with my victim impact statement that I read at Henderson's trial, mostly because so much time has gone by that I feel like I need to take people back to 15 years ago now, to what it felt like to be there then. And then we talk about what's happening now or not happening now, and what members of the audience can do to make it better. Get involved, tell your story, take an interest, speak out, use your voice. And then I do questions at the end.
Well, speaking of that, we're going to do questions shortly, and the way we're going to do that is if you can pass, I think they're written questions are the rules here, so if you can write them and pass them to the side, people will come and collect them, and then we will move to your questions after we get them. But you must have some sense of joy in seeing how much has changed in 15 years. I mean, there's no issue where public opinion has changed faster than on the issue of gay marriage.
Right. I feel very honored to be a part of that movement. There were a lot of people and a lot of time and a lot of lives devoted, time committed, lives committed, commitment made from allies and members of the community to get things changed. And it's starting to happen. There's still so much work left to do, but it is starting to happen, and I feel honored to been part of the process.
I mean, when I look at social issues over time and look at polling on them, which I do all the time, this is the one with by far the most dramatic turnaround in the shortest period of time.
It's really amazing, and I have to think that when we signed the hate crime legislation in 2009, things just sort of began to, like, well, this is going to be okay. The world didn't end. Some states were allowing same-sex marriage. Nobody fell into the ocean. Everything, buildings were still standing. The world went on. And it was just sort of like, oh, this really doesn't affect anything at all except those people in the community, and that's the way it should have been. And it was sort of like an awakening process, and then Don't Ask, Don't Tell fell, and then Part of DOMA fell, and Prop 8, California fell. It was just like this domino effect. It's just really incredible. It's almost like we now have permission. We have permission to accept the gay community, and before I don't think we had that.
And that did take advocacy of people like you and your foundation and others like it.
Yes.
And the courage of people who are gay to come out and say in small situations particularly, you know, I am gay, and I am your brother, and I am your neighbor, and I am your cousin or your friend.
It takes telling stories to change. People need to understand that it's not just the village people who are gay, but your insurance salesman, your doctor, your police chief, your fireman, your next door neighbor. The gay community they're everywhere, and you respect and love them already. They're your coworkers, your fellow congregants, your neighbors, and you already love and respect them. But if you don't know they're gay, then you still have the stereotypical view of what being gay is, and that's just not representative of the gay community as a whole. It just isn't. So telling stories is so critical, and as you said, the coming out process has had such a huge role in that, and people of note in the entertainment world, the sports world, the movers and shakers, when they tell folks that they are gay, it makes a huge difference.
And I have a question that might be impossible to answer, I suppose, but you talked about your statement at the Henderson trial and the impact that it made. He also made a statement, a brief statement, but he said, I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Can you find it in your heart to forgive him?
I don't know, because he hasn't really asked for it in a way that felt genuine to me. Twice that I know of, first he made that one in the courtroom, which he probably felt like he had to do. And then I got a letter from him, Dennis and I got a letter from him when he was in his appeals process asking for forgiveness. And I thought, well, the timings of the law for that to feel sincere. It was like he was a checklist. I did this, I did this, I did this.
I thought he couldn't appeal.
Henderson had the right. McKinney did not. The appeal was thrown out, but he had that right. It never felt genuine or sincere. If I ever feel like one comes to me that is sincere, first I have to be asked to process, do I want to? Can I? Right now, he just kind of doesn't exist.
Well, that's an okay place for him to be with you.
It's a very okay place.
So what next? What do you do with the foundation next?
Well, we have some things that are now legally, legislatively taken care of, but we have many hearts and minds to change left. The younger generation, more and more of them just get it. They just don't care.
As my colleague George Will says, to young people, being gay is about as interesting as being left-handed.
Yes. I find that to be also true. Maybe less interesting than left-handed people. It just is, it's a non-issue totally for a younger generation now, but we still have a segment of the population that is unaccepting, and I think a lot of that is because I think a lot of it is willful, actually. They just choose not to be accepting or understanding. They just don't want to. And so we have a lot of work to do there, and people in rural areas are finding it very challenging. You know, the metropolitan, they see the diversity all the time, but in a place where few people live, it's really hard. It's hard to understand diversity, and so that's what we're trying to do. Raise awareness, talk about it, keep the issue in the public forum, in whatever way that we can.
Have you seen any change in the suicide rate among young gay people?
Well, it sort of comes in waves. Last year was horrific. If it's happening at the same rate this year, we're not reading about it. It sort of feels like in the same issue with hate crimes. If it's going on, it just isn't making it into the press at the rate that it was before. Suicide rate among teens is horrific, but you throw in sexual identity and orientation, and it goes up exponentially, or the perception thereof. The bullying, whether the target is gay or not, the language is always a reference to the gay community. So it's pretty horrific, and they can never get away from it. It's texting, it's Facebooking, it's emailing, it's vining, it's this, it's that, it's horrible, and they never ever get away from it. They just feel inundated, and the suicide rate's gone down. I hope that's true, but I'm not knowing that it is.
And is there anything that you feel you can do at the foundation to try to prevent that?
I want those kids to have a place to go where they can talk, and they don't feel safe in school. Sometimes in schools, it's really not the kids that are the biggest problem. It's the administrators or the teachers or staff that are a bigger problem than the students. They are not helpful. They don't want to deal with angry parents of anyone, and they just don't want to face the situation, which is a problem becoming worse because kids are coming out younger and younger. So public schools are going to have to figure out a way to deal with this in a way that is helpful to everyone.
And you say that one of the things that people ask you all the time is, how do you do it? You know, here it is, 15 years and many, many, many speeches and much having to go back over it over and over again.
Well, as you said, advocacy takes time, persistence. I'm not going to give up. It's not done yet. There's still so much work left to be done. And as long as people are interested in Matt's story and what we do at the foundation, then I'm just going to be here.
It's quite remarkable, and it's a wonderful thing that you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you. The first question is, how has all of this affected your other son?
Thank you for that question. He's doing really well. It took a little while for him to, we always included him in all the decisions. He was a senior in high school when Matt was killed and when we formed the foundation. And he's a very introverted young man, and much like me. You may not think so right now, but I am. So we knew that he wasn't going to be out there in front of a mic with me or Dennis. He went to school. He figured he couldn't decide what it was he wanted to do with his life, so he dropped out of college, went to work. But it wasn't until about 2003 or 4 or 5, somewhere in there, one of his friends who happened to be gay sat him down and said, look, you need to understand what it is your folks are doing and how important it is to people like me, and you need to be a part of it. And so a little while later he called and said, I want to go to work. I want to be part of the web work that you do. So he came to work for the foundation and still is right now. He's finishing his college degree in spring from Denver, and he's in a long-term 4-year relationship with a lovely girl that he went to junior high with in Saudi Arabia, actually. And he's very happy. He's doing just really great. But I watch for any residual whatever might come up due to his the trauma of his senior year in high school. But he seems to be handling it really well. They are both very involved in the foundation work.
Oh, that's great. As a high school student preparing to go to college, how can I be part of the movement for equality, acceptance, tolerance through civic engagement? That's a great question.
Most college campuses now, most, not all, will have an organization that is essentially a gay-straight alliance. Now, it's going to have all kinds of names, ranging from GLOW, which is gay, lesbian, or whatever, to...
That's great.
To Pride Network, or Pride Alliance, or Social Justice Group, or it's going to have a gazillion different names. But they will be committed to raising the profile of the gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender community. And if you're an ally or a member of the community, please join, because they need you and they need your perspective and your time and your commitment. And that is how you can get involved on a college campus. Most campuses now also will, in their listings, tell you if they have an LGBT presence on campus. And there's an organization called Campus Pride that also has listings of these schools and how they interact with their students. It's a big deal right now, which is just wonderful.
This young person, though, also talks about civic engagement. I mean, is there laws that they could be working on in the college communities? Or?
Well, of course, the variety in the college community is great. If you're in LA, I don't know what you're going to do in a civic way, except become involved in the Gay and Lesbian Center. Most large metropolitan areas will have gay and lesbian centers where they do civic activities. They take part in pride events or any kind of conferences or anything like that to do with LGBT issues. Some states are still working on legislation for hate crimes or employment non-discrimination. Federally, we're still working on employment non-discrimination. But it all depends on what part of the country you're actually going to be in.
This might be a hard one, but it's one that I'd sort of like to hear too, which is, can you please tell us who Matt was as a person so that we don't remember him as just being a victim? And then thank you for your work.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. Matt was small, premature. He was about 5'2", weighed 105 pounds on a good day. He was funny. He was smart. A little ADD, I think. Loved people. Loved making them laugh. Very empathetic to other people's issues. He was easy to talk to.
You say he was your confidant.
Yeah, he was, because my husband is in the oil business, he traveled a lot, and Matt became my friend in the house, in Logan too. They became my friends because, well, Dennis was gone. I didn't have much other people around me, so they became my friends, and they were wonderful friends. Matt shared a great deal of interests in movies and theater and books and TV that we liked a lot of the same things. Not all the same things, but a lot. He was very mature in his political aspirations. He participated in his first campaign when he was 7. He hung those very annoying bags on people's doorknobs prior to election.
He was the right height.
Yeah, exactly. And he was very involved in politics of all kinds, national, foreign issues. He wanted to be part of the Foreign Service when he grew up. And when he told me that, it was like inside my heart is just breaking, because I'm thinking, Matt, you're gay. You will never make it in the Foreign Service. There's just no way. And in today's world, that just is not the case at all. So things changed, and that would have been great for him. He was just a wonderful kid, smart, caring, funny, interesting to talk to, talked a lot, loved to argue, probably too much. He did smoke, which I hated. He was a college freshman when he turned 21. He drank too much, which I did when I was a college freshman, and I wasn't even 21.
The laws were different.
Yeah, not for me. No, they weren't. Don't tell my mom, okay? So he was just so fun. Anybody would have wanted him for a friend. He would have done anything for you that he could. He was just special. He was just special.
There was a period where you both were at the University of Wyoming together and living in the same apartment complex.
It was actually in Casper. It was the University of Wyoming at Casper, and we were living in the same apartment complex. That was most interesting. I was there first. When Logan started boarding school, I came back to the States to finish my master's degree, and Matt came back to Wyoming from North Carolina and took some classes at Casper College as well for 1 semester. So we were students together living in the same complex but different apartments, because I couldn't live with him because he smoked. So that was
I think having mom live with you at college was at what point did grief turn to advocacy? Well, Elizabeth Birch, who many people here know, came to see you, right?
Yeah, well, it was a sort of a circuitous event. A gentleman by the name of Dennis Doherty in Denver was at Matt's funeral, and he gave me his business card. And I remember thinking, why is he giving me his business card at a funeral? Well, the whole funeral was a very surreal situation to start with. And when I started looking at all the paraphernalia we had received at the funeral, I noticed on the back of his card, he said, "We would love for you to attend the Human Rights Campaign in Denver." And I said to Dennis, is this something that I want to do? I mean, we researched them a little bit. And he said, well, maybe they can help you figure out what it is you want to do. Mm. So I went to this dinner in Denver, and Dennis thought I should meet Elizabeth Birch, who was then the president of the Human Rights Campaign. And I came to DC and I met her and I adored her, and I still do. She and her partner then, Hillary Rosen. And everybody that worked at the Human Rights Campaign, they were so smart and so committed and did exactly what I wanted to do, and things I knew I could never do on my own. And I just became part of what they did. And I think after I spoke to them, I began to think, well, I know there's other organizations, so I just called them all, national ones, GLSEN, GLAAD, PFLAG, and said, I have a little bit of time where maybe people will listen to what I have to say. Please use me if you can. And that's, I guess that's when it started.
Then there's a question: is the foundation doing anything to end discrimination in the workplace? That many states still allow firing if you're gay.
Right. We can't do anything directly other than just lobby or write op-eds, or we do a lot of corporate work. I speak at a lot of corporations, but we will do whatever anybody asks us for state, not in employment or federal law. We don't close the door on anything. We know there's work to be done. What we don't do is go where we're not invited.
And what about homelessness in the LGBT community?
We understand this is a huge issue. Again, we provide information for shelters where they feel safe, services for kids out of their homes. They leave for various reasons. It's a tremendous problem.
Is it mainly young people?
Yes. People who either have been kicked out of their homes or feel unsafe in their own environment. And many of them won't even self-identify because they're afraid of the reactions of others around them. It's an untenable problem right now. Homelessness in general is an untenable problem. But finding folks who have the resources to assist specific LGBT homeless youth is very difficult. I know Cyndi Lauper has a foundation that deals with this. The Gay and Lesbian Center in LA, New York, we all try to do something, but it's a giant, giant problem.
This is about your book, The Meaning of Matthew. And the question is, one question is, will you sign the book afterwards?
Yes, I will.
Yes. But do you think you portrayed everything you wanted to in the book?
Portrayed everything. Yes, I do. And the reason I say that is because the reason I wrote the book was because I wanted y'all to meet my Matt. You knew Matthew Shepard of the two-dimensional news article Variety, but not my Matt. And somehow he was becoming this picture of perfection that he was not in real life. And that wouldn't have been fair to Matt, and he would not have been happy with that. So I wanted everyone to know who Matt really was. And I'm confident that what I talked about was the Matt I knew, and things.
But you do not make him into a saint.
Oh no, I totally did not. That wasn't my goal, and I didn't want that to happen, which was what was happening from other people.
And for a mother particularly, the notion of Saint Matthew was probably a little much. It's a wonderfully well-written book.
Thank you.
And very good read.
Thank you.
It's really,
and
that must have been very hard to do too.
Well, it was cathartic in a way, because it forced us to, Dennis and Logan and I, to go back and rake up memories that we hadn't thought about in years. And that was cathartic because it not only allowed us to remember really good, happy times, but to remember Matt as kind of the annoying brat that he could be. And that felt really freeing to us, because then all of that came back to us. And that's really what we missed. So that was really beautiful. And the young man that helped us write it, John Barrett, was a very good friend, still is, was for a while the editor-advocate, the way the Advocate used to be. And he was a brilliant, brilliant young man who understood that when I wanted to do the book, I wanted it to feel like I was sitting next to you, telling you the story. So if it's grammatically incorrect,
no, but it's more spoken than written.
Yeah.
And that's very accessible.
That's exactly what I wanted it to be.
Well, you succeeded.
Thank you very much.
How about his friends? Have they stayed your friends?
Yes, there are a handful of his friends, a dozen maybe, from his high school in Switzerland or from knowing in Laramie or Casper, who have stayed in touch with us. And it's really wonderful because now they're our friends. We have an annual fundraiser in Denver, and many of them come to that, so we see them at least once a year. We're in email contact with them. They do fundraisers for us and projects for us. One of them actually just finished a documentary about Matt called Matthew Shepard is a Friend of Mine. She's a brilliant filmmaker, and they're just wonderful young people. Many of them came to Matt's funeral from all over the world.
It was a big group from Switzerland, right?
A couple teachers, and yeah.
And are some of the people that are still in touch with you the angels?
You know, I personally only knew 2 of the angels, so no.
No.
They weren't part of that circle.
This is probably our last question here, but among the thousands of tributes that have been written and said about Matthew, which ones have been the most moving and memorable to you and to your husband?
Well, we receive a lot of communications and things about people who've written songs or poems or done artwork, and they're all very moving in their own unique way. But 2 things have moved us for different reasons. One is a song called What Matters by a singer-songwriter named Randy Driscoll that she wrote and brought to me the evening before Russell Henderson's sentencing. And it's pretty much the story of who cares who you love. And it's a beautiful, beautiful song. And she's a beautiful person, inside and out. Lovely, lovely. I've actually known her the longest of this work. And the other is the Laramie Project, because it's the truth. It's what happened. It's through those people's eyes. It'll always be the same. It'll always be the truth of what happened. And it moves me in a way that the song does not.
Well, it's so real.
Yeah.
And that's the treat you all are going to get when it opens here. I mean, there are all kinds of interviews with the people in Laramie that just stay with you.
Yeah.
I asked you when I came in about the young police officer who went and took him away, and she said a doe had stayed with him and kept watch over him.
Yeah. She was very moved by that. She thought Matt, when she first came on Matt, she thought he was a child because he was so small. And the doe really, really moved her. She was a rancher and had special meaning with the connection to nature, and the doe was really special to her and to us.
Well, this has been a very special evening. Thank you so very much for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much to Koki and Judy. What a wonderful evening. And how appropriate, Judy, that you so beautifully brought us back to the Laramie Project, which I just want to give a plug for all of you. The play is playing through October 27th. Please come and see the play. It is really, I mean, I think you got a great taste of the piece tonight. But to see it at this, on this historic stage is really quite powerful. And I hope you'll all come and join us for that. And also on the back of your program, this is the first of 4 Monday night series. And I think it's next week or the following week, check your program, we have the sheriff from Laramie, Wyoming, who is going to be with us, and the sheriff from Jasper, Texas, who are going to be with us for one of our Monday night panels. They not only were at the place where this all sort of started, but also are a character in the play. So please come back and see the play, come back and support the Monday night events. Thank you all so very much for your evening and for your time. And once again, thank you to Koki and Judy so much.